I'm Vea, this is Case by Case Divorce. Thank you so much for clicking on this video. I want to talk about how the courts fail to protect the child's best interest. When I first got served papers saying that I would have to go to court to settle my divorce, I was completely in shock. And then I was talking to my neighbor and she was like, yeah, but the courts always take care of the kids, right? So you have nothing to worry about. It's obvious that he's not as good of a parent and that the kids like you more, so really there's nothing to fear. And I thought, yeah, there's nothing to fear. The courts do what's in the best interest of kids, right? My personal experience of that is the opposite. And unfortunately, so many of the women I've encountered in my journey and so many of the women I've worked with have also experienced the opposite. And I want to explain why so that you know as you're going into this where the failures in the system are so that you can be prepared, so that you can know what you're dealing with and that you can plan accordingly and make decisions in the most informed and empowered way. So first we need to look at the legal system itself. And I am Canadian. Go Canada! So this is all about Canadian law. My American viewers, my friends, I'm sorry I have not taken the time yet to research American family law. I'm betting it's super complicated because you have 52 states. So if it's anything the way Canadian law works, we have our federal law. Laws made at a federal level have to be upheld by all of the provinces. And then there's provincial law, which the provinces have to follow their own provincial law, and they hold the same weight interprovincially. And then there's, bylaws and stuff that your city might make up or whatever. We've got three parts to our family law system. The first part is the legislation, and these are the rules, these are the laws, these are written down, they're the black and white concrete rules. But if you sit back and think about family law, let's just take best interest of the children as an example. How do you make that black and white? Almost everything about family law is open to interpretation. It could be subjective because there is no set of rules that says if this and this and this happen, then this happens. If this and this and this happens, then this happens. It would be impossible for them to legislate every single little minutia that can happen around families, right? So we have our broad overarching legislation. The next tier down, and this is where things go askew, is the case law idea. We're working with precedent. So our legislation says what the cold, hard, and fast rules are, and the case law is how the courts have ruled around an issue in the past. And in the Canadian justice system, judges have to follow the decisions made out by prior judges on similar topics. So case law is how we fill in the gray areas and the minutia of what can happen in families. And then finally, the third part of our legal system is the people involved. So I'm talking about the judges, I'm talking about the lawyers, I'm talking about your ex and yourself and the parenting coordinators and the mediators and all of the periphery people that come in to support the best interests of the child while they're taking your money and messing you up emotionally. That was a total rant and unprofessional. I will delete that. Okay, so where does the family law system fail kids and families at all three of these levels? At the legislation level, who wrote those laws? Was it women who are raising children and trying to escape family violence? No, it was men. It was white, old men in power. And don't take my word for that. I'm just guessing that that's who it was, but all my experiences in courthouses and around judges and stuff totally make it feel that way. It was old white dudes. Let's just say the patriarchy heavily influenced our legislation. Okay, so the next tier down is the case law. And this is where things could help us or maybe not help us, but this is where we really get into trouble. To me and you, it might be really, really obvious that it is not in a child's best interest to spend time with a parent who has been criminally convicted of domestic violence, who has been criminally convicted of drug use, or somebody who is so mentally unstable that they've been arrested multiple times. That is common sense. However, if a judge ever in the past ruled that actually it's okay for kids to be around people like that as long as they're supervised or as long as they also share time with the other parent, then now that's a law that every other judge after them has to follow. This is where things get sticky, because when a judge makes a decision, it's basically made into a law for every other judge following after in that court. Higher court, Supreme Court judges' rulings are more important than provincial court rulings, and appeals court rulings are more important than Supreme Court rulings, which are more important than provincial court rulings, and et cetera, et cetera. But this is where we run into problems like last year, the Divorce Act in Canada got changed. And so the legislation got changed, and they flushed out terms like violence, family violence, and they flushed out a lot of the gray area. But when we look at case law since the new legislation, there's not really any judges doing anything with that new legislation because they're bound to follow the decisions made by previous judges who were doing that judging without that new legislation. So this is where we kind of run into this trouble of like, but when is it time to change? Because society changes and culture changes and science changes. What we know about kids and mental health and brain development changes, and that should be influencing the judge's decisions. But because of this whole case law and precedent thing, there's not a lot of room for it to do that. So now we get into the third piece of the judicial system, which is the people involved. And this is where we really, really run into trouble. It could be crystal clear to you that you are the better parent. You should have all or the majority of the parenting time. The other parent is dangerous, narcissistic, abusive, mentally unstable, violent, whatever they are. But what the judge is going to hear is whatever your ex presents. And so the legal system is based on the idea that everybody that comes forward is telling the truth. And there's really not a lot that's going to happen if the people involved aren't telling the truth. So you can show up and say, you know, XYZ happened, I saw this and this, the kids came home with bruises, whatever. But your ex could show up at court and they can say anything that they want. And as the judge sitting there listening to these two stories, how are they going to know? How are they going to know? So there's the lying. There's also the fact that very, very few people involved in the family law system have been trained in family violence. So they don't even know. To somebody who's experienced it and maybe done some counseling around it, it's super obvious where there's power imbalances, where there's coercion and control, where there's manipulation. The judges and the lawyers that you're going to be meeting and encountering in the Canadian family law system don't know about this stuff. They don't know that the way you're so reactive or the way that you freeze and can't make decisions is because you're carrying trauma because you're being abused. They just think you're not answering their emails or that you're over emotive. And the other big problem, my final thought on this, the other big problem with Canadian family law is judges have to do family court on some kind of like rotating roster. So you can have a person who's really into the criminal the criminal law system. You could have somebody who's really passionate about like real estate law or corporate law, but they all have to take a turn in family law. So in the province that I live in, it's a total dice toss. You have no idea what judge you're going to get, and whatever judge you're going to get could hate family law, could not really know much about it, could not want to be there and be not personally invested in it at all, which is a huge problem. So if you're just starting out and you're thinking, this is my case, it should be obvious, clearly the kids should be with me, it's in the best interest of the child, you got to consider these other pieces. What does the case law around your particular circumstances say? What have previous judges ruled on similar topics? And what judge are you going to be dealing with? Do they know family law at all? Do they care? Do they want to be there? And what kind of lies and ridiculous slander and smearing is your ex going to do? Those are the things we have to consider, and this is how the family law system is failing kids. So if I was the queen, or if I had a magic wand that I could just wave to change everything, I would have every single person that has anything to do with family law at all be educated in family violence on a yearly basis. Like, let's do an overall course saying this is family violence, this is what to look for, and every year let's do a couple hours brushing up on what that is, how to detect it, and what it really means. Of course, I would also completely overthrow a lot of the legislation so that there's actual ability to enforce things, because right now you can get all the court orders you want. You can get court orders saying that your ex has to do this or your ex has to do that, or this is the parenting schedule, or they're going to pay you this much or that much, but they don't have to do any of that. There's zero repercussions for not following a court order. Yeah, you can pay more money and go back to court to have your ex held in contempt of court, and then what does that do? That does nothing. Plus, case law in the past 10 years has been moving away from that. Judges don't even like to award contempt of court decisions anymore. They're more likely to poo-poo your request and just say it's not relevant. This is the state of current family law in the Canadian legal system. My hope in sharing my thoughts on this and my experiences on this are that you're going to have a little bit more information and have it be a little bit less confusing and have more of an idea of what you're working with, so that you can make conscious, empowered decisions for you and your family. And that's what this video is about. If you found this content helpful, please hit like and subscribe and share it with people, because otherwise no one's going to see it. That's how YouTube works. You have to interact with this video if you like it, or it doesn't go anywhere. And feel free to drop a comment down below and let me know what you think. What's your experience in family law been? Do you agree with my take on it? What do you think? Thank you so much for watching. Take good care. Bye.